Today I'll be reading Chapter 2 of The Art of Walk. Let's go. Chapter 2. Accidental Apprenticeship. The teacher appears when the student least expects. Every single thing that has ever happened in your life is preparing you for a moment that is yet to come. And no. You cannot find your calling on your own. It's a process that involves a team of mentors. And everywhere you look, help is available. Getting pregnant at 23 years old was just about the worst thing that could have happened to Ginny Pang, a native Singaporean who had spent her childhood between Indonesia and Singapore. She knew having a baby out of wedlock meant trouble. This unexpected turn of events would be the first in a series to change not only Ginny's life, but also the lives of many other women. First, though she had to decide what to do about this baby. It started with me not doing well on my exams, she told me on a Skype call late one afternoon, early morning for her. In a place like Singapore, it's very academic, which means if you fail your exams or you don't do well, that's the end of your life. Feeling lost, Ginny fled to Jakarta to live with her grandparents. Having gone through a series of bad relationships, she finally met a guy who was different from the rest. He was older, more mature, and successful. He also came from a wealthy family, which was promising for a young woman who didn't have a hopeful future. Then she got pregnant. Her immediate reaction was, "Oh my God, I'm going to be a mother." Ginny had always loved children and was excited to bring a baby into the world. Her boyfriend, though, had a different reaction. "We're going to go for an abortion," he said. That wasn't the answer she had expected. Having accompanied two friends to their own abortions, she had always told herself she'd never do that. After a month of fighting over whether to keep the baby or not, the couple came to a point where they knew a decision had to be made. He gave Ginny an ultimatum: have an abortion or find a new boyfriend. To sweeten the deal, if she did have the abortion, he would help her start a business, something she'd always wanted to do. This was Ginny's chance to make something of herself. And there might not be many others. Abortions are illegal in Indonesia, so Ginny moved back to Singapore to figure out what to do next. After arriving home, she made an appointment to see the doctor and then postponed it a week. Still having doubts, she scheduled an abortion but spent the entire day before the procedure deliberating over whether to go through with the decision. She prayed, cried, even went to confession. Ginny felt stuck. "I just couldn't bring myself to do it," she told me. At the same time, I didn't know how I was going to make it work. To make matters worse, her mother had also given an ultimatum. If Ginny kept the baby, she'd have to move out of her parents' house. In Singapore, you don't leave the house until you get married, she explained, because of the government policies and how expensive it is. The idea of being out on her own scared her. Not only that, but she would have to live with the guilt of having brought public shame to her family. With no job or backup plan, how would she survive? The night before the abortion, just a few minutes before 8 o'clock, when Jenny was supposed to take the pill that would begin the abortion, her aunt called. "Flush the pills," she said. "We'll help you. We don't know how, but we will help you." Those were the words Ginny was waiting to hear. She always wanted to keep the baby, but just didn't know how to make it work. Until that phone call. Sometimes, all it takes to make a difficult decision is an affirming voice telling you what you know to be true, but still need to hear. That's what a phone call at 8 o'clock at night did for a young, soon-to-be mother from Singapore. Ginny flushed the pills. Everything just fell into place, she recalled. Someone said something that felt right. This is a phrase Ginny uses a lot. It just felt right. For her, feelings are important. They are signposts to be trusted in, signposts to be trusted in the journey to your purpose. But even an emotion wasn't enough to sway her toward bringing the baby into the world. Risking personal bankruptcy and financial failure, she had to have confirmation. At the time, plenty of people were giving her reasons why she shouldn't keep the baby, but none that makes sense. When her aunt called minutes before the abortion, those were words that rang true. Confirmation came from in the form of one of the few relatives who hadn't abandoned her. In spite of the odds against her, Ginny went through with the pregnancy. For her, it was the only thing that felt right, even if it meant being rejected by family, ending a relationship, and facing public ridicule. She left home, her mother wasn't bluffing, moved in with her grandfather, whose house belonged to the same woman who had convinced her to keep her baby, and prepared to become a mother. If you were to speak with Ginny, you would be struck immediately by her presence. She lacks any shame that should follow someone who has been through so much rejection. You can tell just from the way she carries herself that she is someone who deserves respect, and you want to give it to her. In her eyes, there is a resolve that a simple no or a "you can't do this" is not going to stop. It was that look, which I first saw in a tagged video, that made me respond to her email. "I have a star personality," she told me. And I had to agree with her. She's a strong woman, hardened by the pain and difficulty, but nonetheless full of life. When we see someone who has succeeded in spite of tremendous odds, we are tempted to proclaim this person a self-made man or woman. When we do this, though, we ignore an important fact, one that is essential to anyone's success. They didn't do it alone. As I dug deeper into the complexity of Ginny's story, I realized that was the case for her too. Yes, she's a strong woman that's impossible to miss. You can't go through what she's endured without being tough. No one could argue with that. But even strength has its shortcomings. When you might miss when you first meet Ginny Fang, and this is in no way meant to discredit her courage, is that without the support of a few important people, she wouldn't have made it. The accidental apprenticeship. In the Middle Ages, a young person worked for free in exchange for experience, room and board. The student, called an apprentice, would live sometimes in the same house as the master, sharing meals with the craftsman's family. This was the way a person became a professional, and the process began as early as age 12. After completing the first stage of apprenticeship, the student, who was now called a journeyman, could venture out and travel to other cities, walking on his own. What a journeyman could not do, however, was to take on apprentices. That right was reserved only for masters. In many ways, a journeyman was still a student, though now to be able to pay for his work. To be a journeyman meant applying the techniques your teacher passed down to see if they work in the real world. It was a test to see if you had what it took to become a master. There was a certain amount of restlessness to being a journeyman. It meant you hadn't found your place in the world yet. After a season of wandering, a journeyman had to submit a masterpiece to the local guild. If they found it worthy, the journeyman could graduate to the title of master, being accepted into the guild and finally able to take on apprentices. Then the process would start all over again. How much time do you think this process of apprenticeship took? Based on the modern equivalents, we might guess a few months, possibly even a year or two. Not even close. Under this system, an apprentice typically worked for a minimum of 7 years before venturing out on his own. Then he would spend another few years as a journeyman before finally becoming a master. If he was worthy, the entire process took about 10 years. If you started training at 12, that meant you wouldn't become a professional until your 20s. And if you started later, you might not be able to practice a trade until your 30s. That's only if you were lucky enough to get an apprenticeship in the first place. 10 years. That's how long it took to master a craft. This may be difficult to grasp today, but nearly every college student has the opportunity to go through multiple internships without much practical application. But as we have seen so far, finding your true calling takes time. Practice is essential not only to achieve excellence, but to clarify the call itself. An apprenticeship was an excellent way of learning a skill under the guidance of someone wiser and more experienced. But these days, there is little left of the apprenticeship system, which has left an unfortunate gap in our education. With the dawn of the Renaissance, the guilds eventually declined, and the popularity of universities grew, replacing the apprenticeship with a more general education. The ancient art of diving deep into a specific craft all but disappeared. In modern times, the responsibility for reaching your potential is often left up to the individual. This is more than a challenge, it's a cruel taunt. How can a person be all she's supposed to be if she doesn't know who she is? If she doesn't have some example to aspire to? Pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps can only take us so far. And despite what we've heard, there is no such thing as a self-made man. We are all products of our environment, influenced by the people we encounter and the places we live. Born into this world, with zero ability, we cannot talk, much less feed or clean ourselves on our own. We need help. Our parents begin this process of helping us grow into our God-given identities, but at some point, someone else must take over. In epic stories of old, a young hero is called away, leaving his family to begin a great adventure. But before he steps into the battle to face the dragon or start a revolution, what must happen? He needs a sage, a master magician, or perhaps a retired coach. However he or she appears, the master's job is simple. Teach the young person how to sharpen and refine his skills. Take over where his parents left off. But how does such a system work today? Not the way you might think. More often than not in the life of an extraordinary person. At a certain point, they encountered a guide, some coach or mentor who helped them along, investing in their abilities to help them grow into who they were born to be. Sometimes it's a single person, other times it's a group of people. Regardless, the result is an often informal process of apprenticeship, full of failure and self-doubt, but ultimately instructive. The truth, in spite of what we might believe about remarkable people, is that you cannot master a skill on your own. Finding your calling will not happen without the aid and assistance of others. Every story of success is in fact a story of community. Some people will help you willingly, while others may contribute to your education on accident. But if you are wise, you can use it all. When you set out on the road to self-discovery, it will not just be you walking on that road. No man is an island. John Donne wrote, and this is better news than we realize. We're all sharing the same path as we march toward our destinies. Your journey, though unique, is full of fellow sojourners as well as teachers who will help along the way. Your job is not to find them, but to recognize them when they appear. In many ways, apprenticeship is an extension of parenting process. For some, a mother or father figure initiates the transition from immaturity to maturity, but eventually, someone else must complete the process. At some point, while we head toward our life's walk, someone new and unfamiliar will have to come into our lives and speak with authority. Those people often come unexpectedly and can serve a vital role in our education. So let's look at how you don't miss these accidental apprenticeships. Like slipping into an old pair of shoes, Despite having made the decision to keep the baby, Ginny was about to enter one of the most difficult times in her life. What she needed most, the loving support of a community, would be all but absent. I was very lonely during pregnancy, almost suicidal. She told me it was the only time in my life where I couldn't see beyond 24 hours. Each day, Ginny would wake up grateful for making it to another sunrise, and each night she would cry herself to sleep, overwhelmed with anxiety. Nearly every person in her life had abandoned her. She had brought shame to her family, lost her boyfriend, and compromised her social status in a country where unwed mothers are treated as second-class citizens. Even her friends didn't know what to do with her. While they were out partying, she was preparing to be a mother. They couldn't empathize with her situation and started excluding her. Still, she knew something was right about the path she was on. During the delivery, the nurse kept asking when Jenny wanted the epidural. At first, she declined, but eventually took it because she started feeling sick. At the suggestion of her aunt, Ginny wanted to have a natural birth, but no one had ever told her how to do that. So she bore her son the best that she knew how. While her mother sat in the corner as she labored, it was hard, much harder than she imagined, but she got through it, and in the end, had a beautiful baby boy. The birthing process made me realize how important it is to be supported, she said, to have someone believe in you and protect you. How important it is to keep women safe. That was just the beginning. Though she didn't know it at the time, the whole experience, even the pain of childbirth, would soon play an important role in Ginny's life. After the birth, she went back to her job as an office secretary, which provided some stability but wasn't enough to satisfy her. The position provided steady hours and flexibility to spend time with her son, but the pay wasn't great, and she was sure this wasn't what she was supposed to be doing with her life. I was bored, she said. I couldn't see myself living this way for the rest of my life. But she wasn't about to give up, in spite of the taboos that surrounded her situation. She wanted respect and wasn't afraid to break convention to do or to get it. My favorite tea, mixed with tea leaves, ginger, and honey. Drink it if you must. It's really good for you. And it's really good for me too. Allow me to take 1 minute to take a sip out of this. I like it. Partly out of curiosity and partly due to boredom, Ginny started an online business educating mothers on the health benefits of breastfeeding. She and her peers had grown up on formula, and as a result, very few Singaporean mothers knew much about nursing. Through her online store, she sold t-shirts and other products advocating breastfeeding awareness. She had seen the positive effects of nursing her own child and wanted to help other mothers who were interested in more natural approaches to child rearing. Although she wasn't much of an online shopper herself, the experience opened up a whole new world to her. Since she was usually walking or taking care of her son, most of Ginny's socialization happened through a network of friends she had met on the internet. One friend, Amy, was an Australian Chinese woman who had been successful working as a doula in Singapore. Since she was the only one Asian doing that sort of work, locals trusted her. One night, when they were talking, Amy said something to Ginny that would change her life. "Ginny, you will make a good doula." "What's a doula?" I asked Ginny. "A birth coach," she told me. "Someone who helps a mother create a plan for how she is going to handle the birth of her child." When she heard this, it took Ginny by surprise, because back then she didn't know about what a doula was either. She didn't have one at her own child's birth and had no idea what doulas did. Her friend added that whether she became a doula or not, taking the class would be a good experience. I've always been a fan of personal development, Ginny told me. So she signed up and took the class, learning all the things that doulas did. But when it came time to attend her first birth, Ginny forgot what to do. She panicked. Taking a deep breath, Ginny let her spirit take over and tried to focus, remembering her training. She started by massaging the mother's back, then comforted her through the experience, assuring her that everything was going to be all right. It worked. This wasn't the mother's first child, but it was her first delivery without drugs. And she was scared. Afterward, the mother was elated, crediting Ginny for how relaxed she felt and how easy the experience was. It was exhilarating, Ginny recalled, like slipping into an old pair of shoes. Thus, once she knew she could do this, shortly after the first delivery, her friend Amy left Singapore, almost as mysteriously as she had entered Ginny's life in the first place. It wasn't the most traditional model for mentoring, but it was the apprenticeship Ginny needed. And as we will see, that's usually how the process works. Multiple mentors. Mentoring is an easy word to throw around these days. You will hear it tossed into conversation amongst friends or casually mentioned between business colleagues or over coffee. But mentoring is much easier to talk about than it is to practice. Why is it so difficult to find a mentor? To begin with, you are dealing with people, flawed human beings who each have their own expectations and agendas. We all have our own issues, and one of the reasons it can be so hard to find a good mentor these days is that so few people have been mentored. We have believed the myth of the self-made man and have given in to the illusion of self-reliance. What we need is something to pull us out of our own independence and arrogance, which means the mentor that comes might not be the one we were expecting. Chances are, your apprenticeship will not look like you imagined. Your mentor may not be the teacher you dreamed of, and that's the point. This is your education of what is, not what you think should be. A teacher who challenges you, who doesn't meet your expectations, who forces you to think and act differently, is exactly what you need. That is, after all, the job of an educator. The teacher appears when the student is ready is a nice-sounding cliche. But the truth is, the student is never ready. Throughout our lives, we will encounter a number of people who will appear at times, ready to instruct, and it will be our job to recognize them. In my life, I've had many mentors, from my college chaplain to my first boss, to the guy who lives down the street from us and sometimes helps me fix things. Most of the time, I fail to recognize the importance of these relationships until well after they were over. Sometimes, their influence was subtle and undetected. Over time, it was clear they were trying to invest in me. I was just too stubborn to practice it, appreciate it. In every example, though, I would have benefited more from the mentor had I been intentional about the process. Throughout this process of finding your life's work, you must be willing to look for mentors in unexpected places. Your friends, long-lost relatives, even old relationships that have dwindled down may become the sources of inspiration you need. Each person serves a purpose. Some will arrive at just the right time to cheer you on, while others are there to identify with the struggles you're living. And even others will show up when you need them the most. All of these people in their own way are mentors, contributing to your apprenticeship. How do you find these people? Where do they come from? It's hard to tell. Likely they will surprise you, appearing seemingly out of nowhere at just the right time. The whole thing will look like an accident or a mystery, but, of course, it is far from it. As Paulo Coelho writes, when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. There's some truth to that. Fortune favors the motivated, When a person is determined to not just succeed but to do work that matters, the world makes room for such ambition. You won't be able to predict how this apprenticeship unfolds, but you can be prepared for it when it comes. Ginny Fang would have easily missed her calling had she not heeded her friend Amy's advice to take the doula class. She may not have been ready for what would be required of her, but she was ready to take action. And that small step made all the difference. I often hear people who need guidance in their lives asking for advice on how to find a mentor. But that's the wrong question to ask. When you pursue a calling, you will find a community of supporters to champion you along the way. It's not up to you where these people come from or even how to locate them. You just need to keep your eyes open. Accidental apprenticeships are all around you, and if you listen to your life, you will be able to recognize them. The resurgence of apprenticeship. In East Hampton, New York, Ellen Frank is reviving a practice that the world hasn't seen since the Renaissance. In her small studio, she is teaching a handful of interns the art of illumination, a technique that involves using gold to embellish sacred documents. The studio is called the Illumination Atelier and is a haven for live-in artists who want to walk under the guidance of a true master. Atelier is a French word meaning workshop, and during the Middle Ages, these were the main areas of education for artists. In such a workshop, the master artist, often accompanied by assistants and apprentices, would create works that would go out in the master's name. It was a collaborative effort, which allowed the artist to produce more work and provide a learning experience for the fledgling artists. Ateliers often worked in collaboration with local guilds, which controlled the apprenticeship process. And although they can still exist in a few places around the world today, their popularity has dramatically declined. To Ellen Frank, this is a tragedy. Her small workshop is an opportunity to share her passion for not only art but also peace and reconciliation. After a trip to Jerusalem in 1999, where she experienced a land in turmoil, Ellen was inspired to create a large-scale piece using the Illumination Project. While designing the invitation to a celebration party for the exhibit, she had a moment of grace, realizing she wanted to continue exploring these themes of peace and cultural understanding in her work. She started a foundation, which provides support and housing for interns who want to learn illumination. Since 2005, she has been finding interns on Craigslist from more than 15 different countries and inviting them to work in her studio. In Ellen's studio, interns are involved in the whole process, from imagining the initial concept of a piece to the creation of it, to even important business decisions that have to be made for the foundation. They always get their names added to the work they do. The decline of the atelier, including to Ellen, has meant a decline in artistic technique and craft. Our little atelier is trying to fix that. I think we bring back an intimacy of mentorship and training where the apprentice learns directly from the experienced artist. She said in an interview with National Public Radio. They also acquire validation. It's not teaching through critique. It's not teaching through judging their own work. It's teaching through saying, yes, and why not try this? And yes, you can push this further. Can you push this further? When Ellen teaches, her voice is gentle, almost motherly, as she guides her students through the technique with soothing words of affirmation and phrases that build anticipation like this is the magic moment. She helps you feel the significance of what you're doing. which in turn leads to confidence. Some interns, she admits, have even become better than she is at certain techniques. This is the power of the process. A good apprenticeship isn't about an exchange of information. It's about passing on the skill of the master and multiplying it. This small studio is just the beginning. Ellen's real dream is an open atelier where all kinds of people, not just artists, can come and learn. As I listened to the radio tell her story, it was hard not to think education should look more like this, and less like large lecture halls with passive students parked in seats for 90 minutes at a time. Eyes glued to a slide presentation. Can you imagine a wall where school looks more like an atelier and less like an auditorium? In some areas, that's not quite so unrealistic. Germany has one of the lowest unemployment rates in Western Europe. The reason for this is its dual system, which involves young students enrolling in vocational schools that allow them to split their time between study and work. In this system, a student might work a few days per week with the business and then spend the rest of his time at school. Unlike most apprenticeships, internships, these students get paid a percentage of a full-time worker's wages, and 90% of them complete their programs. Above half of the people continue working with the company after the apprenticeship. The experience is a taste of employment that not only adds value to the company, but also gives the student an education he can then use in the real world. Unlike other parts of the world, where unemployment is skyrocketing, Germany has a shortage of workers. A good job is available for anyone who is qualified and willing to work. What's lacking are the workers. Maybe this is true in other parts of the world as well. We don't need more jobs, we need a better way to equip people for what they are meant to do. In the case of Germany, such a system seems to be creating more jobs than it can handle. As apprenticeship is designed to give you guidance from an expert, knowledge in a given field, and experience in a challenging environment, all of which prepare you for your future. But such an experience, as promising as it sounds, is not easy. It takes a lot of courage and tenacity to not only find but also finish an apprenticeship. Life is complicated and messy, not often looking like the textbook told us. Most of us struggle to find our way, and we are desperate for guidance, which often seems unavailable. It can be tempting to check out and choose a seemingly safer path. The chance to do work that matters is a choice. Opportunities to learn and grow are available, if we are willing to look in the right places and humbly accept what we find. Use your environment, the Steve Jobs strategy. Every place you go, every person you meet, every job you have is a chance to gain greater clarity in your self-education. Life is the classroom, and if you are paying attention, you can recognize the daily lessons available. Each day is a new page in a textbook you never complete. And as you sit in the student seat, you realize the apprenticeship has already begun. The smart way to begin this process is by practicing with the tools available to you. Traditional mentors are hard to come by, but you already have access to wisdom and experience. Teachers who will guide you in making decisions that will help you find your way. Who can you call on the phone and talk right now? What friend or former coach would meet you for coffee this week if you asked? We all want to find someone who wants to invest in us, someone who cares, without realizing those people are already in our lives. The worst way to get a mentor is to go find someone. The best way is to see the ones that's already there. Jenny Fang spent years trying to find her way, barely surviving. She wasn't searching for some great calling. She was fighting her life. But this is how we encounter our life's walk, in the midst of some other pursuit, while striving to pay the bills or simply make it through another day. At some point, though, something unexpected appears and changes everything. And often that something is a someone. The teacher appears one you least expect. For Ginny, a few people served as guides in her journey. First, there was the aunt who encouraged her to keep her son and gave her a place to stay. Then, there was Amy, the friend who told Ginny she'd be a good doula, convincing her to undergo the training. Finally, there was the producer who filmed a documentary on unwed mothers in Singapore and became Ginny's roommate. As Ginny's business grew, her roommate helped her by watching the baby and taking care of administrative responsibilities, such as building her first website. Without the support of these people, Ginny admitted, I wouldn't be where I am today. Each person had a different role to play and help in a unique way, appearing at just the right time when she needed it. This model looks vastly different from the Renaissance version of apprenticeship, but accomplishes the same result. An accidental apprenticeship begins with listening to your life and paying attention to the ways in which you are already being prepared for your life's walk. Ginny's success wasn't in that she planned any of this out. It was that when the opportunities came, she acknowledged them and took action. This was how Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple Computer, got his start. His own education was almost entirely informal, beginning with a short stint at Reed College, where the classes were so expensive, he decided to drop out after 6 months. Sleeping on the floors of friends' dorm rooms, he stayed on campus and continued to audit a few classes, including a calligraphy course, which he later credited for influencing the beautiful typography used in the first Mac. Later, Jobs became friends with Steve Wozniak, who, before they founded Apple together, helped him get a job at Atari. Woz had redesigned an earlier version of the game, Pong, which Jobs passed off as his own work to get hired as a technician. While working at Atari, Jobs, who was hard to get along with, learned important lessons about design, software development, and creating technology for consumers. With every opportunity, he gained guidance, knowledge, and experience, each from a different source, all of which he was able to use later in life with Apple and Pixar. Rarely do you find all the elements of an apprenticeship in one place, but if you look in the right places and are careful to pay attention, you will find them. Apprenticeship, then, isn't a class you take or a mentor you meet. It's a choice you make. And in that case, an accidental apprenticeship isn't much of an accident at all. It's the intentional process of choosing the opportunities you need to create your life's work. Unlike a formal education, this option is available to anyone. Instead of waiting for a teacher to come and choose you or an academic institution to accept you, this apprenticeship is ready to begin when you are. From apprentice to master. When Ginny Pang's boss saw her on a full-page feature in the national newspapers, he didn't like it. Unwed pregnancy is a taboo subject in Singapore, and most unmarried mothers don't talk about their situation, much less appear on TV. Those willing to talk, therefore, tend to get a lot of attention. Believing in the power of education to dispel ignorance, Ginny started making appearances on any documentary, current affairs program, or news shows that would have her. She would tell a story and share what she was doing. It didn't take long for her boss to find out what she was up to. Upset, he told her she would have to choose between her newfound passion and her stable job. He even offered her more money to stick with the day job. I came to a crossroads where I had to decide. Ginny said, am I going to do this job that gives me certainty, or take the leap of faith and venture into a place that's never been explored in Singapore? At the time, there were no full-time doulas in Singapore. Ginny's Australian friend Amy had left the country, and the few remaining doulas were only working part-time. Nobody knew whether or not a person could make a living off this kind of work. It was quite a gamble. Leap and the net will appear. It's a saying we sometimes hear in reference to such situations. The idea behind the phrase is that when you are backed into a corner, an impossible solution will present itself. At the times when you feel stuck, the right thing to do is take a risk and go all in, with whatever the scariest option might be. So that's what Ginny did. She took the leap. Fast forward 10 years, Ginny now runs 4 trimesters, a full-time doula business, and the largest company of its kind in Singapore, with 7 employees. She has been featured on TV programs and in news articles, and has had an opportunity to speak at a TED event. Hers is a story of defying the odds, of persevering until passion became reality. If there ever were such a thing as a self-made woman, Ginny is it. But did she really do it all on her own? She would be the first to tell you no. It was difficult to get that ultimatum from her boyfriend, and even harder having her mother throw her out of the house. Those were difficult experiences and are still painful memories. Even now, a decade later, she gets cross looks from strangers when they learn she's not married. If you were to ask Ginny when she was a little girl what she wanted to be, she wouldn't have said a doula. That idea hadn't even occurred to her until someone else suggested it. She always wanted to run her own business, but didn't know how to make that happen. Through a series of accidents, though, she found her way. It wasn't by design, not her design anyway, and she didn't understand what was happening as the events were unfolding. But with the help of a handful of people, Ginny was guided to her calling. At 5 years old, I wanted to be a dancer and a businesswoman. Ginny wrote to me in an email. By 13, I thought I would make a good counselor, and was told that I would be a good radio DJ. Now in my 30s, I am still unfolding and can see all my childhood dreams materializing in my work as a doula. There's something to be said for the power of perseverance and a person's will to survive. Certainly, Ginny's story is a testament to the ability of the human spirit to endure. But it's also a testament to the power of community, a reminder that we never find a calling on our own. We all need help. Years ago, when deciding whether or not to keep her baby, Ginny never could have imagined where she would be now, helping other women have the support she never received as a new mother. What makes her story special, though, is not that she got help. Help is always available when we need it. It's that she recognized it when it came. Remember, this all began because Ginny didn't do well on her exams. It wasn't an exceptional education that brought her to this place. It was a series of unexpected incidents and unlikely mentors that created the perfect opportunity to grow. An accidental apprenticeship is like that. These experiences are impossible to engineer, but easy to recognize once you know what to look for. Sometimes people who help us find our calling come from the least likely of places. It's our job to notice them. That is all for today. Tomorrow I'll be reading chapter 3. If you haven't followed me, please do so. I am reading books 1 chapter a day so that you don't have to read it in your own time. All you have to do is put in your earphones and listen to me. This is Daniel. See you in the next one.